Good morning, Advocate Loubser.
Good morning, Mr. Chief Justice.
Are you well?
I will thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.
Thank you, thank you. Are you relaxed?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Tell us why you believe it is your turn. It's you are ready, and this is the right time to appoint you. In your own words, based on your experience, your act instinct, and any other thing that you consider relevant, briefly but pointedly.
Yes, Mr. Chief Justice and honorable members of the Commission, every time I came to the occasion rather late in my life, I think the reason for that is that I never had ambition in the sense that I wanted to push myself into high positions. I firmly believe that when the time comes, one will be aware of it. And when I did my time as an acting judge during the first term of this year, I felt comfortable in the job. I wasn't doubtful, and I felt that I had the experience to be a judge. And on the insistence of other people, colleagues of mine and so on, I came to the point where I made myself available. And as I said, Mr. Chief Justice, in the last paragraph of my application papers, I said that I'm not making this application because I'm obsessed with the idea of becoming a judge. I'm making this application because I think it is the proper thing to do for any responsible citizen of this country who feels and is comfortable with the idea that he's got the experience and the little skills that are necessary to be a judge. That is why I decided to make myself available.
And for how many years have you been senior counsel?
Not for long, Mr. Chief Justice, only for almost a year.
And before then, you were practicing for how many years?
For 26 years, Mr. Chief Justice.
What took you so long to become silk? What explains the delay in taking up silk?
I was comfortable in my position of not being a silk, but eventually I felt I got the idea, and maybe I was totally wrong, but I got the idea that maybe a judge would listen more attentively to a senior counsel. I found myself in the position for almost 10 years, I would say, where almost on a daily basis, I appeared against KCs in Lesotho, SCs in Lesotho and in South Africa. But eventually I thought maybe the time has come now for me to also apply to become a silk, to get that extra weight in court. That is why I then made the application.
Were you not concerned that taking, as long as you have taken, to become silk could give rise to the unfortunate impression that you didn't have what it takes to attract the quality work that a silk ought to attract if you do become a silk? Were you not worried about those inferences or that cynicism, if cynicism it would be?
Not at all, Mr. Chief Justice. That awareness never came up in my mind.
Yes. Thank you, JP.
Thanks, CJ. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Judge President.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And yourself, ma'am?
I'm fine, thank you. How long have you acted in the not only in our division, for just indicate the period during which you have been appointed as an acting judge, whether in our division or in any other division?
No, I only acted in the Free State Division for about a month.
For
That was from the end of February until the end of March.
One of the comments from one of the professional bodies is that you have not acted sufficiently. What is your comment about that?
Madam Judge President, yes, that can be said because it's a reality. I only acted for 1 month. But on the other hand, I think that people who are qualified to become judges and to have the necessary experience and the skills to become judges don't need that qualification of having acted necessarily. And I think in my specific case, as I've said before, from the moment that I sat on the bench at the beginning of the year, I felt comfortable. I did not feel uneasy, and I could feel that my experience through all these years is assisting me.
Yes, in that period of a month, how many criminal trials were you able to finalize? And I'm not talking about where there was a plea of guilty. A full-blown criminal trial. How many did you do?
I haven't been allocated any criminal trials during that period. I did sat in 2 criminal appeals with Judge Reinders.
But in your practice, please correct me if I'm wrong, you specialize in civil work, not in criminal work, don't you?
Yes, I actually do much more civil work than criminal work. Although the criminal work does come up now and then, but only in exceptional cases.
You don't have to agree with me. Don't you think that you'd need another acting stint, if not 2 or so, just to have the necessary exposure to criminal work, seeing that it's not your speciality in your practice?
Yes. I think one must just be mindful that my background is a background of criminal practice, in the sense that I was in the prosecuting authority for a number of years at the beginning of my profession, and I have that background of criminal work. And thereafter, I appeared in many criminal cases. For instance, in the so-called Barbie case in the Pretoria High Court, I was briefed there to appear on behalf of the 2 accused, Advocate Dirk Prinsloo and Advocate Visser.
But you have, oh, sorry.
Yes.
But you have not presided over a criminal trial, have you?
No, I haven't presided during my stint as an acting judge.
Okay. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, JP. Just a quick one on the experience you already have. Part of the challenge is this, and an acting stint helps us to satisfy ourselves. We have people who have been senior counsel before, others with a lot of experience, who just can't finalize judgments on time. Some of them are before the Judicial Conduct Committee now. But when you act, a JP and we, when we interview you, will be able to say, oh, this one was able to produce judgments on time. Don't you think with that perspective, it might be a bit of an impediment, or a challenge rather, to be recommended for appointment without knowing in advance whether you'll produce judgments over a protracted period of acting on time?
That may be so, Mr. Chief Justice. I concede that, but may I respectfully point to the judgments that I have attached to my application.
Yes.
And I respectfully submit that those judgments will show my background and my experience to deal with even very complicated matters.
Yes. Thank you. MEC?
Thank you, CJ. Morning, Mr. Loubser.
Good morning,
How's
Mr.
the morning
Commissioner.
to you?
I'm well, thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Good. Just one or two questions. The first one, why did you wait for 26 years before you can think of applying to become a judge? You said you had a 26 years experience. Why did you take you so time? Because I thought that you must have gained a lot of experience to become a judge, to apply for a judge.
Yes.
Why now? Why not 4 years or 5 years or 10 years earlier?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, that is a good question. But I want to motivate my response as follows. I've said before that never in my life I have tried to push myself into important positions. That is not my personality, that is not my style. But when other people came to me and said to me, we think that you have the qualities to go there, then I decided to take the step and to make the application. One of our previous prime ministers in this country has said that a leader is not somebody who makes himself a leader or who tries to be a leader. He is pushed upwards by his compatriots. And I think that was my attitude.
You acted for is it 1 month? That's what you
Yes,
said.
yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Do you think with acting with that 1 month, you have necessarily acquired the skills of being a judge?
I think so,
Within a
Mr.
period of 1
Commissioner.
month.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, I have no doubts about that. As I say, I've been in private practice for more or less 26 years. I know the procedures in the High Court, I know the procedures in application proceedings, in civil proceedings, in criminal proceedings. And as I said, when I took up the position of an acting judge, I never felt doubtful in any way. I never felt uneasy. I was satisfied that I could do the job.
I didn't want to pursue this point, but I want to mention it to you. I want to put it to you to say, you indicated that until other people came to you and said that, could you consider, I want to believe, to apply for a judge? Why do you have to be told by other people and not look at the interests of the country?
Well, Mr. Commissioner, I think I am looking at the interests of the country because I think I've reached the stage with my experience, and on the insistence of other people, I've reached the point where it would be a responsible step from my side to offer my services and my experience to my country. I think that is the proper thing for any responsible citizen to do.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, MEC.
CJ, I want to make a quick follow-up.
Okay.
You quoted the Prime Minister, man. I want to read that Prime Minister. So if you can just refer me to, give me a name, the date of the speech and all that, so I can go and read further what you said about that Prime Minister.
I cannot say, Mr. Commissioner, when it was said and where it was said, but the Prime Minister was Mr. John Foster.
Thank you very much. I knew that.
Judge President Loubser.
Thank you, Chief Justice. You have enormous experience as a practitioner. Share with this commission what steps have you taken to transfer your skills, particularly to African women in the profession?
Yes, Mr. Judge President, as you will notice from my application papers, I appear in the Lesotho courts in a more than regular basis. The system is somewhat different in Lesotho because there's no there's no difference between attorneys and advocates.
I'm sorry, Chief Justice, we're talking about South Africa. You want to be a judge in this country.
Yeah.
Let's talk about South Africa.
Yes. Mr. Judge President, I did not have the opportunity for women, but black people I did, black men.
Can you elaborate, perhaps, for
Yes.
the record?
Yes. Mr. Judge President, some years ago, about 5 years ago, I was approached by the Bar Council to take on a black pupil to be his mentor in the bar. And I took him on, and we worked hard, and he didn't make it the first time, but the second time, I insisted that he stay with me because I knew that this man had to become an advocate because I was serious about transformation. And as far as I'm concerned, transformation starts with numbers. You cannot speak of transformation in the Bar Council and in other instances where a legal life is concerned. You first have to get the numbers. And the second time around, this man did make it, and he is now flourishing as an advocate in the Free State Bar. I think of another man who wasn't a youngster when he came to the bar. In fact, he was a member of the Council of Traditional Leaders here in Pretoria. He came to the bar, he was allocated to another senior member in the bar to be his mentor. And so it went on, but then only 1 month before his final exams, the Bar Council approached me and said to me, there is a problem between this pupil and his mentor at this very late stage. They don't see eye to eye, and this pupil is very much concerned about the fact that he did not get sufficient practice, exercising, and sufficient teaching to pass the exams, and they requested me to take him on board, to take him over. And I jumped at the opportunity, and as I say, it was only 1 month before the exams, and we sat after hours, me and this man. We sat after hours, and I quickly realized that his skills in legal writing were lacking. And in the end, we sent him into the examinations, and he passed. And it gave me a great feeling of satisfaction that I could make a contribution in that sense. Today, he's a respected member of a practicing member of the Free State Bar, and I'm very proud of him.
Justice, my second question is this. Let me put the following to you. There is racism in the country, there is racism in the profession, and there is racism on the bench. Do you agree with me?
Absolutely, Mr. Judge President.
Were this commission to appoint you for a permanent appointment to the bench, what steps would you personally take to assist the leadership of the bench to address the issue of racism in the profession and on the bench in particular? Thank you, Chief Justice.
Mr. Judge President, I will certainly take all steps that are available to me. Any steps that I identify as steps where I can make a contribution to get rid of this thing of racism. Can I mention that I regard my whole life, and especially my professional career, as a journey in trying to understand peoples of other culture, peoples of other tradition, because where I grew up in the apartheid era, I grew up in a white box, and other cultures found themselves in black boxes. There was no interaction between the two of us. And I remember that in trying to understand, even as a schoolboy, if I can go into that for a second or two, I started that journey of understanding. My father was a minister in the Dutch Reformed Church, and they had a practice there that whenever black people want to attend a funeral service of their white employer, they had to approach my father in order to get his permission to enter the church building. And on every occasion he would grant that permission, but then with a condition. They must sit at the back of the church, or they must sit up there in the gallery, and I couldn't understand it. Because according to my understanding, the blessings and the love of the Lord is for all people, regardless of color or race. And heaven is for all people, regardless of color and race. And I took up that point with my father when I was at high school, and I said to him, I don't understand this. Please explain to me this system that you have in your church. And his explanation, I remember that very vividly, his explanation to me was, yes, but what I say is the truth. But if he throws open the doors of the church and all the black people come in, it would scare off the white members of the congregation. And I said to my father, but wouldn't you then rather say, praise the Lord because the church is full? Or, even if there's not one single white face in the church left, won't that be your attitude? And I say this today in honor of my late father, that he had the courage to listen to a schoolboy. He had the openness of mind to take notice of what I was saying, and not long after I left school, in fact, he extended an open invitation to all colors, to all races, to attend this church. That is where my journey started, and it continued when I went to the Transkei in later years and when I went to Lesotho in later years.
Thank you, JP. Commissioner Mpofu?
Thank you, CJ. Yeah, mine is a very short, two questions. One is a follow-up on the, good morning, sorry, good morning, Mr. Loubser.
Good morning, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes. Follow up on this issue of you said you try to understand other cultures, and I see that, like me, you were born in East London.
Yes.
And practiced some in Mthatha, and you're the King's Council in Lesotho, and so on. Can you speak any Xhosa or Sesotho?
I can say Dumela Tati Lekai, yes, but I can't take it much further than that. Mr. Commissioner, I read the scriptures as saying that all of us receive certain gifts from the good Lord, and certainly I haven't received the gift of languages. But I think that I've compensated for that to the extent that I say in all honesty today, as I sit here, I have many more friends in the black community in Lesotho than I have in my own white community. And I'm honored by the fact that the President of the Court of Appeal of Lesotho, Dr. Mosito, whenever he comes across me outside the court, he hugs me and he says, he calls me my brother. And I take great satisfaction in that. It is a...
Okay. So, thank you. So you also take great satisfaction that all your friends and brothers that you hug, for you to interact, they have to speak your language, but you can't speak their language.
Yes, but Mr. Commissioner, you know, I've learned through my professional career that my black brothers in this country are in fact very kind, very understanding, and full of assistance. And I've never encountered one single moment where it was held against me by my black friends in the black communities, where it was held against me that I could not speak their language. And I must say, I've tried to speak the language, but I never succeeded in doing that.
All right. Sorry, no, okay. Let's leave that. And now, can you tell us under what circumstances did you leave the Eastern Cape? Can you give us the story there?
Yes. I regard that as a sad story, Mr. Commissioner. I was a state advocate in Mthatha. And one day I was allocated a case where I had to prosecute one of the leaders of Umkhonto we Sizwe in the Transkei on charges of high treason and sabotage. And all I had against this gentleman was a confession, a written confession that he had made to a magistrate. And he disputed that confession in court, saying that he was forced by the Transkeian police at that time to make this confession. And he said he was held in a cell where the flushing system of the toilet operated by means of a chain. And he said every day that chain was put round his neck and he was suffocated until he agreed to go and make the confession. And in rebuttal of those allegations, I, as the state prosecutor, called several high-ranking officials of the Transkeian Police to testify that this man is not telling the truth because the flushing system is operated by pushing a button. There is no chain in that cell. And when the judge eventually adjourned the court after 2 or 3 weeks of having a trial within a trial to determine the admissibility of the confession, he adjourned the trial for about a week to prepare his judgment. And on the day before his judgment, I became very, very concerned about this whole issue. Because, Mr. Commissioner, I've learned in my years in the Transkei that all people who commit crimes are not necessarily common criminals. Many of them commit crimes because of an idea, because they are fighting for the rights of their people. And I thought by myself, isn't this perhaps an instance where this man had done something wrong, fighting for his people? And I thought, but of course that is what happened because he's a leader in Umkhonto we Sizwe. And what I did when I became concerned like that is I took my car and I drove up into the mountains to that remote place where he was detained and where that toilet was. And I walked into that toilet, and Mr. Commissioner, I was shocked. And I was amazed to see that in fact there was a chain hanging from the flushing bell of the toilet. In other words, the truth was not spoken by my police witnesses. And the following morning, when the judge entered the court with a bundle of papers containing his handwritten judgment on the admissibility of the confession, I stood up before he could speak a word, and I said to him, my lord, I have something to disclose to this court. I drove to that police station, and there is in fact a chain. And he immediately adjourned the court. For 10 minutes he came back and he said, in the circumstances, because of my disclosure, he's not going to allow the confession. Since I had no other evidence, I closed my case and the man was summarily dismissed. And outside there were great celebrations going on because of his acquittal. And then some 3 to 4 weeks later, I had to appear before a commission of 2 attorney generals in an interview for a promotion. And when I entered the interview room, I saw that there were records of proceedings on the table before these 2 commissioners. And as I sat down, the first thing that was said to me was, we have taken a look at the record of the case in so-and-so, and we want an explanation from you why you had stabbed the state case in the back by making that disclosure to the court. Why did you not keep quiet? Because the man didn't do well in cross-examination. Your police witness testified well. That confession would have been allowed had you not stood up and made that disclosure. And I said to him, sir, I'm very sorry. My explanation is that I'm an officer of this court. I have to go and sleep at night with my conscience. The death sentence at that period of time was still in full force and effect. And the charges being high treason and sabotage, this man was heading straight for the gallows, had that confession been allowed. And I told him that, sir, should anything of the kind happen again, I will do the very same again. And he remarked to me that his words were, and I will never forget it, I take a dim view of your attitude. And then I decided that I could not work for an employer who expects from me to display dishonesty in court as an officer of the court, and that especially where people's lives are on the line, I have to be very specific and I have to tread very carefully. And then I immediately resigned from the public service. And I remember that evening I was sitting with my wife and 3 more small kids in our house there in Umtata, and we thought, what now? I'm without a job, where to now? And that is where I decided to make an application to the bar in Bloemfontein to be allowed as a pupil.
Thank you. Do you remember the name of that MK operative?
Mr. Commissioner, I don't remember his
That's
name. I remember his nickname, but in the circumstances, I'm not willing to
His MK
to
name.
disclose
That's
his
fine.
name.
That's fine. All right. Thank you very much.
I was told, can I just mention it? And I'm speaking under correction. I don't know if it's the truth, but I was told afterwards that that man later became a cabinet minister.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Mpofu. Commissioner Norman?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good morning, Mr. Loubser.
Good morning, Madam Commissioner.
I just want to, when you were acting for the month, in which court were you deployed? Was it just the appeals court, or did you do any motion court?
No, I did a full unopposed motion court.
Yes.
I also were involved in opposed applications. I was involved in 3 or 4 civil trials, and then I also had to deal with appeals.
Thank you. Do you have any reserved judgments from the opposed motions?
No, not at all.
Yes, thank you.
No, not at all. I handed down my judgments very, very quickly. I think the one which is attached to my application papers was handed down 3 weeks or 4 weeks after the hearing, but that was because my colleague judge went on holiday during that time, and I had to wait for him to come back so that he could check the judgment and sign with me.
Yes, thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Advocate Loubser. Your excuse.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.